This is an Audi R8, the Lamborghini in the business suit, the sharply styled German exotic. However, if you're looking to buy one of these, stop right there. Do yourself a favour and watch this video, because I'm going to cover all the common problems to help you get the best car possible. Let's go. So let's start by talking about whether you should buy just a normal R8, if there is such a thing, or if you should spend that bit more money and get the V10 Plus. Well, if you want the short answer, spend that bit more money and get the V10 Plus. In the UK market, as it stands, you're probably looking anywhere around that £15,000–20,000 mark of premium in order to get yourself into a Plus model. But it's just so much more car for the money. Let's get into some of the details that you do get. So for starters, you get these massive carbon ceramic brakes. You get the carbon fibre front trim, you get the carbon fibre mirrors, side blades, rear wing. You get a lot of carbon fibre, even on the inside as well. You also get upgraded wheels and tyres, you get the sports exhaust with the black diffuser tips, the larger steering wheel shifter paddles that look really nice. You get the Bang & Olufsen sound system, and you also get shorter gearing as well. And breathe. So yes, if you can, try and stretch to get in the V10 Plus. So if you've watched any of our videos before, you know this is not the channel that gets into the nitty-gritty of the specs. And we also don't talk about all the brilliant features that the car has. Well, maybe we do occasionally, but overall, this is the channel that gets into the dirt. We show you all the common problems so you can go in as informed as possible and get as good a car as possible. Now, just a heads up, as we go through this, the faults are going to get progressively worse and worse, so make sure you stay tuned and see them all. So the first thing I'd like to mention is to do with the brakes. Notice I say thing and not necessarily problem. That's on purpose, because what I'm going to tell you here isn't necessarily a problem, but if you were to hear it and not know otherwise, you might assume it's a problem. So I thought it was worthwhile including, and that is the brakes on these R8s can be really quite clicky. Let me tell you what I mean by that. You're slow speed manoeuvring or driving along slowly, and you start to hear a clicking coming from the brakes. What you're hearing there is the pads moving ever so slightly inside those calipers. Now, Audi did release a technical bulletin for this, and basically the fix was a little bit of double-sided tape on the back of the pad to stop it from making the noise, but the caliper would heat up, the adhesive would fail, and you know it, the noise would come back. So long story short, if you hear a bit of clicking from the brakes, don't sweat it, it's completely normal. So next up is a bit of a problem, and that is a judder that you can feel coming through the steering wheel when lightly braking. Now, this has time and time again been falsely diagnosed as a problem with the brakes. I hate to think someone out there's actually went ahead and replaced these ceramic brakes as a result of this problem, when really it's got nothing to do with them. What it is, in fact, is the control arm bushes on the front of these cars. They can wear out quite quickly, and when they do, that tends to be the main thing that you'll notice as a judder coming through the steering wheel. So that's one to keep in mind throughout the entirety of your R8 ownership, just in case you start to notice it down the line. Next up, let's talk suspension. Now, if you've gone for a V10 Plus or you're looking at a V10 Plus, chances are it came from the factory with the fixed dampers. Those tend to be pretty reliable. Now, if it's a non-Plus car you're looking at, an awful lot of them were spec'd with the infamous mag ride system. Now, I feel bad saying infamous because it is actually a brilliant system, the way that you can just on the fly adjust how hard the damping is. You can have it soft, you can have it hard. But the problem with them is the seals tend to perish, the fluid seeps out, and then before you know it, you've got a knocking damper that needs replaced or refurbished, which of course is not cheap. Now, on that note, try and have a look underneath the car. If you can see where the car's kept overnight, have a look in the floor and see if you can see anything, because they do tend to leak and they'll leave some evidence of that. Now, stick around on this video, because once we take this for a rip out on the road, and oh yes, we are going to take it for a rip on the road, I'll tell you some extra things to look for as well. So here's a strange little issue for you, but definitely one that you're going to want to be aware of, both on the car that you're buying and the car that you've bought. Because what we've got here is effectively an open area in this grate where water and such can seep in, particularly when you're washing it. No doubt it's going to get in here. The issue with that is these oil filler caps can sometimes have a problem where they don't lock in place correctly. Now don't get me wrong, there is a seal on it, so you'd need to be quite unlucky, but it does heighten the chance of water or anything else getting into the oil tank from here. So what you need to do, pull that oil cap off, make sure it's all looking okay and all as one, put it back in place and make sure it clicks back in firmly. So hopping into what is still an absolutely wonderful, beautiful interior, there's a few things to check. Now in terms of the seats, the door cards and whatnot, you know what you're doing there. You name it, you check it. Have a look at the carpets, make sure there's no cigarette burns, all the usual stuff. However, here's the one thing in particular that would be easy missed, and that is the dashboard. Now this is more going to apply to those of you who are in hotter climates, but what can happen is the sun coming through the windscreen can cause the adhesive that holds the leather on the dash to fail, and it starts to bubble and ripple and such, and getting that repaired to OE quality would be an absolute nightmare, no doubt. So have a good look along the base of that windscreen. Now for the next faults, well, they're easier to talk about on the move, and quite frankly a fair bit more fun as well. So let's go. So here we go then, undoubtedly the bit you've been waiting for, getting the car out in a test drive, seeing how it feels to you, and I must say it does feel extremely special right away. Now first things first, get that air conditioning on, get it blown cold, and leave that on for the entirety of your test drive. Blown compressors and leaking lines are not uncommon, and we want to spot it on the test drive, not the drive home. So make sure it's on, make sure it stays consistently cold, and it's not going from hot to cold. Now next up, remember what I'd said about the brake judder, but hang on, it's not brake judder, it tends to be the control arms. Just testing you, but keep that in mind. Seriously, make sure there's not a strong judder coming through that steering wheel. Now unfortunately, as I'd said I was going to do, I've saved the worst for last. Not to put a dampener on this amazing experience of driving this R8, and it really is wonderful. If you're in the market for one, I can see why. But unfortunately this is a buyer's guide and we need to keep you informed. Now the worst part is the gearbox problems on these cars that have started occurring in years of late. They've started to crop up, and you want to be double sure that you're not buying a car with a gearbox that isn't healthy, of course. So the first one actually relates to the paddles. It's not the gearbox itself. And what happens is, if you're going along just like we are here, third gear, 2,500 RPM, and I pull that downshift paddle, it goes down into second, as you would expect. Now what will happen if the paddles are faulty is it will actually stay in third, the display will show second, but then immediately jump back to third. That's a faulty paddle, and that would need to be replaced, so test that out. Now the final thing I'd like to talk about is the gearbox once again. Now this is not something that's common, so don't be too frightened by it, but there has been a handful of cars, it's not been one that's had a complete and utter catastrophic failure within the gearbox. What seems to happen is one of the clutches will let go, and unfortunately the gearbox just turns to salvage. Unlike the Nissan GT-R, for example, where you tend to bend a single fork or a single synchro needs replaced, if this goes, it tends to be the entirety of the gearbox that needs replaced. And there we go guys, you now have all the tips that you need to go out and find a fantastic Audi R8. And I'd really urge you to do so. They are amazing cars, and that leads us on to how it shapes up on a reliability scoreboard. Now a few trivial problems, and of course those gearbox ones which are a bit more significant, but even with all that in mind, it still scores a massive 8.5 out of 10, which makes it super reliable, not just for a supercar, but for any car. Now thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you on the next video.